Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to OCD Recovery's YouTube channel. I got Erica here, my wife, and we're going to do another video up in the mountains real quick. I'm going to do a little where we are. There's a couple trails around here. Our car's up there somewhere. There's another trail right there. Who knows where that goes? I'll convince Erica to walk it afterwards, even though it's getting really cold up here. It's getting real cold. So we wanted to talk about, let's go like this. There we go. We wanted to talk about advice for friends and family members. And I have a bunch of questions. I did forget my sheet, but thankfully I only wrote it down a couple hours ago, so I know the order. So before you go any further, please subscribe, hit that like button. We actually have a playlist for friends and family. We want to be adding to that. Erica has some really good advice, practical advice, how it was in the beginning, you know, when I first became latched, the things she noticed before. And if you're interested in any of our webinars, please email info@ocdrecovery.com and we'll go from there. We will probably have a friends and family webinar. It is something we've been talking about. Erica's hearing about this for the first time, so hopefully she'll be there. We'll make it for a time where she will be there. I think it will be really good. And we'll try to really push it for friends and family. So let's just jump right into it. I wanted to ask you, if anything, she doesn't know any of the questions I'm about to ask her, so this will be really good. Did you notice anything odd about me before OCD latched?
Yeah, you were like a 0 or 100% type of person.
So,
and you would switch back and forth sometimes.
What examples would you say? And I don't want to give any hints. What were the things that you noticed?
I mean, counting your macros was one of them.
Counting my macros was one of them.
He
Huge.
would count his macros all like every day, and he had all of the notebooks that from years before that were completely unnecessary to keep, which we shipped out to Colorado after we moved. He kept all of them for years, and in fact I think we still have a bunch of them in our basement still.
And my program books.
So
what about school? Did you notice anything about school?
School, I mean, he had to be the first one in class. He had to be the first one done a test. He liked to know all the answers to the test and be right about all the answers to the test. Very perfectionistic, I would say. Perfectionistic, I think, would be a good way to put it. Yeah,
that was, I remember actually, if I wasn't the first one done with a test, anxiety would be building, and I had no idea why at the time. I know why now. You know, I wanted to look acceptance. This is why I struggled so hardly with unconditional acceptance, unconditional self. I tried so hard to be the best at everything and never accepted that I could be the worst at something. So, and that was I don't think, imagine what would have happened if I would have been the worst at something. I probably wouldn't have handled that very well.
Which is why you would have been a 0 person, 0 or 100. Either you're the best or you're not doing it.
Yeah, which is yeah. So okay, let's fast forward to when it latched with my tinnitus, which was June. I remember perfectly. Was in the pool, woke up. We were in the pool that day. I woke up, it was like middle of June. What was it like for those 3 months before sensory motor? What can you tell friends and family members, sufferers themselves, what you noticed, tips and tricks in the beginning? Like, what was I doing? How was it for you? How did you take care of yourself?
I just said he's 100 or 0. He was 0 for like everything. For everything that he used to be 100 for as well. Like we, just after it started, we came out to Colorado to visit. We went out to Oregon to look around, and you didn't want to do anything, which was weird. It was very weird for it, because he normally is like a busybody. He likes to be out doing things and stay busy, and he just like didn't want to do anything.
Yep.
And I was really frustrated by that, because I wanted to explore and see all these things.
What tips and, I don't like even using the word tips and trick. What advice, because there is no tip and trick with OCD. What advice would you have for a family member in those first like few months of when it becomes completely chronic? Especially if they're like, I'm not talking about they started dating someone and it's already chronic. Maybe you're dating someone, or maybe this is for a mother and a father and your kid has contacted you. What do you recommend for when that latching happenings the first couple months?
Well, it depends if they know what's going on. Because if they don't know what's going on, then it's probably, your reaction is probably, nobody knows what's going on. I didn't know what was going on, so I was really frustrated. I was like, why the hell can't you just come do normal things and be normal? And just snap out of it. So I think it just depends on whether or not they know what's going on. If they do know what's going on, then that might be a little bit different. I would say it's not going to get better overnight, and any expectation of that for it to get better overnight is you probably need to let that go, because it's probably not. I don't think I've ever heard of one case where that was the situation where it went away overnight. So I think that would be the biggest expectation, and then understanding that it's not going to be easy. There will be easier moments, but there are also going to be extremely difficult moments, and it's probably going to feel like a roller coaster for a long time.
Which we talk about a lot. We talk about the roller coaster, the ups and the downs. And the same thing I think is important that you highlighted, that there is ups and downs just as severe for friends and family members, especially loved ones watching. If you're living with someone, son, daughter, you know, anything like that, husband, wife, brother, sister, something where you're with them all the time, and there's a lot of, you know, especially intimate relationships. I mean, they're affected. They are affected. The next thing I wanted to ask you, when they do find out it's OCD, and what was it like for you? So let's fast forward to when we first moved to Colorado. What was the biggest difference between the year 2020 and the year 2021? I wanted to ask you that specifically. 2020, year 2021. What was the biggest?
With how you were operating?
How I was operating.
That
you
well,
noticed.
I mean, May 2020 is when you started committing to your recovery. So between 2020 and 2021, it was two completely different people in a positive way. You were able to handle the discomfort a lot better. I mean, we had started a business at that point. So, I don't think that I would have done that if I felt that you were the same as you were in like early 2020. In fact, I can say that I absolutely wouldn't have started a business if you were still in that place. So it was very much different. I don't know how else to say it.
And what recommendations would you have once they figure out that it is OCD? So let's say, same thing, your wife's watching this, the husband now has OCD. What's the recommendations for them, the wife or the husband, the non-sufferer, or mom or dad, once they find out it's OCD in the beginning and they're really, you know, pardon my language, they're fucked up? What's advice would you have for them?
I would say for myself, what I found was I had this perception of what OCD was, like a tidy desk or like arranging things a certain way. And I think that having that perception in my head is actually what held me back from understanding, because I was like, well, you know, this other person said that they have OCD because they like things a certain way. And maybe in fact that was the case, but I just wasn't seeing the whole situation that they were experiencing. And I was like, well, they can still be functional and do all of these things. And so I think getting the perception of that for me was really important, and understanding that maybe I was perceiving it incorrectly. And that maybe there are also varying degrees of difficulty with regards to OCD, because maybe somebody has a very mild form, maybe somebody else has a really severe form. So I think for myself, at least I can say in the beginning, that is what really held me back, I think, from being more effective and more understanding.
Yeah, and I think that's you know, it's a learning process for everyone. You have to learn. We you know, friends and family members, sufferers have to learn. It's a process that I think is an ongoing thing for a while, right? A couple of years, to be honest, about really learning about. You had to learn what reassurance is, what it wasn't, playing into that. I know this is an example that was tough, but one of the things I would say a lot is I don't want to be here anymore. And then she would learn to either not respond, or I know this sounds crazy, but she would be like, you know, how would you say it?
Sometimes I would just say, okay.
Yeah, you would just say, okay. I mean, that's just the way it was.
And that was kind of something that would be like, I don't know, a little bit of a shock factor to you, being like, what do you mean? Because he was saying it for the purpose of looking for reassurance.
Or
like,
exactly.
It's going to be okay. And once I started learning that that's actually where that was coming from, and that he wasn't necessarily going to hurt himself, I started dealing with it a little bit differently.
And if
that's not necessarily every case.
Exactly. And we always have to say, if there is a risk, there is a flight risk or anything like that, please contact the corrective services. That is very important. We talk about that all the time.
But it is a learning process, learning where it's coming from, whether or not it's...
And there's no line.
Yeah.
It's a gray area. There's a massive gray area.
So it does come down to like knowing the person really well and trying to understand the situation that they're in.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I think was great. The next thing I want to transition into, and I think this is probably the most important part of the video that we're going to talk about. What were the unhelpful things you started doing to cope? What are the unhelpful things that you had to change about yourself that were not that good?
Wine was one of them.
Yeah, well, I knew you were going to say that.
Wine was probably the biggest one. Prior to all of this, I liked having a glass of wine with dinner, and that was fine. But once this started happening, I was having 2 glasses of wine, maybe more. And it wasn't until I realized that Nick was actually stealing my wine, which he hates wine, that was kind of a red flag for me.
I'm a weird Italian.
Because I was getting mad at him, saying, well, you're drinking wine to numb yourself, and like, is this going to cause another addiction issue on top of like the video game addiction that he had? And as I'm saying this to him, I'm like, wait a second, I'm doing the same thing. I'm drinking the wine to numb myself, to feel better about what's going on. So checking that motivation was really important. And so I just took alcohol out of the house altogether for a pretty long time. So that was unhelpful. What else was unhelpful?
Were you trying to distract yourself with work all the time? Was that something you were doing? See, I was so messed up, I really don't even know, because I was like so stuck with the video games.
I want to say yes, but honestly, I don't think so, because when I was at work, I was distracted about what you were doing. If you weren't there, what you were doing at home, I would be tracking your location. Like, he's not responding to me. Did he go to a gun store? Is he driving off a cliff? Like, I don't know.
Because weapons are readily available where we live in Colorado. I mean, like, you can walk into a store and buy a semi-automatic rifle very easily with a very light background check. They do background checks, but I have no private... No, actually, because of my mental health stay, that probably would have...
I have no idea.
That would have flagged me, actually.
I don't know, and
Yeah.
I have,
Yeah.
I have no idea, so I was still concerned either way.
No, seriously. Yeah, no, absolutely.
But I think, just the other, I don't know, I've already said this, the other unhelpful thing was probably just, why can't you just be normal? Why can't, a lot of this stuff, it was coming from a very self-centered place for a while. Why can't you pay attention to me? All you're doing is playing video games. Like, why can't you see that the life that you have is really amazing? And it was coming from a selfish place. It wasn't coming from, I want to help him. It was coming from, I want to help me and I want my life to feel better. Until the one day where I was walking Daisy and I finally had my epiphany moment where I was like, what if I could only think about the same limited thoughts all day long? Super distracted by all these things. And then I was like, wow, that would probably be really hard to deal with. And that was kind of my moment.
There's a lot of gnats up here.
There are. That was kind of my moment where I was like, okay, not that the fighting stopped, because the fighting continued for a long time, but I was fighting for a different reason. Instead of fighting from, I want you to pay attention to me, it became, you're not helping yourself. And, I don't want to continue watching you go down this rabbit hole of video game addiction, potentially alcohol addiction. So the fighting continued, but it was from a different place.
And I think that segues into my last question for you. And then I'm going to talk about mistakes that we make towards friends and family members. What's the best piece of advice you can give them if they suffer, which they won't, for a lot of times, they don't want to listen?
You can't do anything about it. And accepting that you can't do anything about it. And this goes for OCD or just life in general. People will not change unless they want to change, and you cannot control whether or not somebody's going to change and do the work that they need to do in order to get to a better place. Yep. So letting go of that control was huge. Like I would say prior to his OCD, definitely had some control issues that I worked on. They did get worse. I shouldn't say probably. They did get worse when, or they came back at least when he started suffering. So letting go of that control and understanding that you don't really have a whole lot of control, if any, was pretty big.
Yeah, I think that's the best thing. Like I said, I really wanted to kind of interview Erica in this because the friends and family market is just so limited. There's not that much information out there. So I think it is really good to share this. The other thing I wanted to talk about I'm going to turn this way a little bit. From my perspective was, I don't know why I did that because you're not, and that was just moronic, just dumb, just pure stupid.
That's okay.
Wow. So anyway, the last piece of advice that I wanted to give from my perspective is this. They're trying to help. They don't understand. They're confused. They don't know any better. They'll never understand OCD, and that's okay. Erica cannot understand OCD because it would be like if I gave Erica OCD for a month and she knew it was going away. You might suffer for a month, but then your back of your mind, you're like, it's going away in a month anyway. So the uncertainty would be so good, because you're like, it's going away. We don't want our family members and loved ones to suffer. I know you might say stuff like, you don't understand. This isn't fair. The life doesn't owe me any, I don't deserve this, all that stuff that we've all fallen into many times. It's very easy to do that. But obviously, that's doing that to them just doesn't help, and we all know that. It's not productive. Look at this, the sun is coming out now. Wow. So thank you so much for watching this video. If you have any questions for Erica, please ask, and Erica will comment, and I'll show her under my account a guy who hikes, and we'll break down some questions for you. Please share this with your friends and family member. Please have them explain that, if we don't want to listen, if I don't want to listen, the sufferer, you can't do anything about it. Erica can't do shit. She could literally hold a baseball bat to my head, and I'm not going to listen because...
I threatened divorce for months. The threat didn't
do anything because I didn't want to listen, right? It has to come from us. Having a good support structure is great, but it does. Thank you so much for listening. Like I said, Erica will be looking at comments with me. And if you're interested in any of our webinars coming up, please email info@ocdrecovery.com. We'll go from there. Thank you, guys.
Have a good day.
Peace. See ya.